Good evening, Aledo ISD families, and welcome to the beautiful Vandergrift Elementary Library. I'm here with Dr. Bone and Mr. Husfeld. If you've been around for a while, you've probably seen our faces before on a Facebook Live, but we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. Again, I'm Mercedes. I'm our Director of Communications. This is my 11th year in school communications, my 4th school year, I think it is, at Aledo ISD. And then Dr. Bone, of course, is our superintendent. This is her 6th year in Aledo. She's been in public education for more than 20 years and started off as a teacher in the Houston area, I believe it was. And so been around public education for a while. And then Mr. Husfeld is our CFO. He's been in Aledo ISD 13 years. Your lucky 13th year this year. And he has been in public school finance for, I believe we added it up to 38 years earlier. So
a long time.
Yep, he's seen a lot of changes in public school finance over the years. So these are my experts, I feel like. So we decided to bring both of them on today to just do a Bearcat budget 101. It is very complicated, public school funding is, and there's a lot going on. You've probably heard a lot of talks about budgets from school districts all over North Texas, all over the state. And so we just kind of wanted to bring you back to the basics of how public school funding works. And we're not going to dive too deep because it does get very complicated, but we're hopefully going to answer some questions. We did open up a form for you guys to fill out the last couple of weeks and had some questions come in through there. We sent an email a couple weeks ago, got some responses to those emails, and so we've formulated this whole presentation based on your questions, and at the end you'll see some more specific questions. A lot of them were pretty broad, and so we want to give a pretty broad overview of probably some words that maybe you've heard before. The basic allotment, what is funding, state funding and local funding, and just all sorts of things like that, buzzwords that you hear that you may not really know what people are talking about. So, Mr. Husfeld, you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to start with you. So we're going to start with just basics. School Finance 101. How are schools funded? That's a very broad question, I realize, but
Very, very broad.
Be broad for us.
Excuse me. Generally speaking, funded is primarily from local property taxes as well as the state funds as well. The tax rates are set locally, but based on the property values that we receive from the Central Appraisal District, Parker County Appraisal District, Tarrant County Appraisal District, a small portion of it. So made up of local revenues derived from property taxes, and then the other side is based on state revenues that we receive from the state. They kind of work hand in hand, kind of offset each other in a sense. We've got a slide that talks about the budget, the revenues that we've got. The one we've got on the screen is the expenditure side of the appropriations. Where's the one on? Is there one?
Go back to there. One more. Oh, it didn't make it. It's okay.
Okay. So we've got out of our budget revenues that we have, the current year for the 23-24 year, there's roughly about 62% of our budget comes from local sources. About 36%, 37% comes from the state sources. That's a little bit more this year, or less from local sources this year, because as you know, last fall there was a homestead exemption increase that was constitutional amendment, and when that drove down property taxes, the amount that we collect because of the homestead exemption increasing. So the state made up that difference, and we'll talk a little later about hold harmless and the basic allotment, but essentially the state made up that difference, so therefore that's why our state revenues increased this year. The percentage of our budget increased. On the expenditure side, you see that's on the extreme, the expenditure side. We're a service business, we're a people business, so approximately 78% of our budget is from people, salaries and benefits and so forth. Our district is a little unique in that we contract out our custodial services that we provide in the district, so that's in like what's called professional and contracted services. If I included that within our payroll and payrolls costs like most districts typically do, our percentage would be like 82% in payroll and related costs and stuff. Professional contracted services, as I mentioned, if we're contracting out services, the biggest item there is like utilities, water, gas, electricity that the district pays across the district, supplies and materials, just that. Capital outlay, the biggest item there is property casualty insurance that we pay, and then capital outlay is equipment, vehicles, things like that, and stuff that we would maybe buy out of our operational or general fund, operational budget. The included within there as well is a recapture. We're a property wealthy district, as you've heard before. We pay like Robin Hood payments, recapture payments, and so forth. So included within this budget is about $875,000 that we anticipate paying this year, remitting back to the state. Over the years since 2010, 2011, when the district became property wealthy, we've paid in over $12 million in recapture or Robin Hood payments from Aledo ISD. So that's a very high level look at the makeup of revenues and expenses within the district.
Okay, so you mentioned the word basic allotment. We've heard a lot about that lately, how it hasn't been raised for school districts since 2019. Can you explain what the basic allotment is? And I mean, I know it is very complicated, so don't get too much into the weeds for us, but like explain on a high level of what the basic allotment is.
Essentially, the basic allotment is the starting point for calculating the state share of the revenues that school districts receive. As Mercedes mentioned, it hasn't changed since 2019. The amount is $6,160, and the legislature determines that. The legislature sets that. They have the opportunity of setting that or adjusting that each biennium or each legislative session.
Really quick, $6,160 per student.
Per student,
yes.
60 per student per average daily attendance. That's, as I mentioned, that's the starting point. Then that number is adjusted based on the types of students you have, the property wealth in the school district. For instance, like if we have special needs children and stuff, they have a weight for that. Bilingual ESL, a weight for that. So that adjusted basic allotment is adjusted to calculate the net bottom line that we receive from the state for our revenues. And I mentioned the legislature does set that. Also, another factor that that impacts the amount of revenue that we receive from the state are what's called hold harmless provisions, where, like for instance, I mentioned previously where the additional homestead exemption we increased from 40,000 to 100,000. Well, the state says we'll hold districts harmless in that regard, so we'll make up that difference and give more state revenue. So there's like 3 different levels in there of hold harmlesses and so forth that impact the amount of individual revenue that Aledo ISD might receive versus what Weatherford ISD or Azle ISD might receive. So there's various factors that impact each district, so it's not all the same for each school district. Just the starting point is.
Right, so all districts don't necessarily receive, well, probably there may not be any 2 districts who are the same in the entire state who receive the same amount of money per student, because there's so many factors that go into, they just start with the same amount,
exactly,
but they may not end. So you may hear, and you probably have heard before, this school district gets this much per student, this school district gets this much per student. It's because all these different factors contribute. That was pretty good. I think
that's
that was
correct.
Pretty high level. Good job.
Yes.
Good job.
Yes. You were paying attention.
Yes. Okay, so again, also complicated, and we hear all the time, does the state fund, Dr. Boone, if you want to take this one, based on how many students are enrolled or based on attendance? We'll take weather, one of our favorite subjects. This is a subject that comes up a lot when you have weather issues and getting kids in school or not. And so it comes up a lot. Will you explain the difference between enrollment versus attendance?
Sure. Before I do that, I want to just mention quickly, I'm not a CPA. Yes. Most of us aren't. I mean, there's a good number of us probably who are.
Earl is our man.
And so there are some things about school funding that are very counterintuitive from my perspective. And so I just am grateful for anyone who's either on with us live watching this or maybe watching it later who has a level of interest in this, and just wanted to say that we're going to do some kind of high level discussion here, but anyone who has any further questions, maybe you are a CPA and you can really understand this stuff, we're always happy to answer any questions about how we're funded or what our budget looks like. So let's just talk a little bit about enrollment versus attendance funding. And so in the state of Texas, we're one of only 6 states in the United States who fund on attendance. And so what that means is the school district receives funding per student only if the student attends. Mm-hmm. And other schools base it upon enrollment and typically have some factors to sort of account for attendance and changes in enrollment during the school year in those states. So one of the things that's challenging about this, and we as a district have requested of the state to reconsider this, many districts have in Texas, is that let's say we have a bad weather day, or let's just say it's a regular day and it's flu season. So let's say we have 90% attendance versus 96% attendance on a day. Our expenses on that day do not change one bit, but we get less funding for that day. So we obviously are paying all the staff, we're running all the same buses, we're paying for the fuel, all the lights are on, we're paying all the insurance. So there is not so it's an interesting and I think sort of counterintuitive way to fund, because the attendance level is not commensurate with the expenditure for the day. So that's why we've advocated for enrollment funding instead.
And so when we say, I mean, we make decisions obviously that we hope are for the best of our kids and our district and our staff and everything like that. There's really not a lot of truth to they want the funding for that day because it's spread over the entire school year. So one day of 90 and 50 days of 96 is going to bring you down a little bit, but it's not, I mean, we want you there every day,
Right.
but that one day, we're not getting funded for that day,
Right.
for that
Right.
percentage, I guess I would
And
say.
there are some things in the state system where if we have a really, really low attendance day, like on some of those bad weather days that we have, then we can file a waiver to try to be sort of held harmless on that day. We don't make a decision about having a bad weather day or not on whether we're going to get attendance funding for that day. Well,
Right.
we'll work that out. That should not have a significant impact on our funding.
Yeah.
But obviously, it does have an impact on our funding if we have a flu season.
Right,
What it doesn't do is have any impact on our expenditure whatsoever.
right. Yes, those buildings will be open.
Right.
So one of the other kind of confusing parts is just there's two parts to your tax. Even though you really see it as one tax rate, there's really two parts to the tax rate, which can be complicated, especially when you're looking at just passing a bond and then needing to do some budget cuts. So will you explain the difference between those two and why one really doesn't impact the other when it comes to needing to do budget cuts?
Sure. So I'm going to stand up to use this slide. So we have two parts of the tax rate and two parts of our budget. So one is our maintenance and operations side of the budget. This is the part of the budget where we run all of our operations. The other is the interest and sinking part of our budget, or part of the tax rate, also sometimes called debt service. We say I&S for short. And that is where we take care of the debt that we take on, largely due to having to borrow money for large capital expenditures like new school buildings because we're growing. So let's look at M&O, or maintenance and operations, first. So this is what we use to run the day-to-day school district budget. It's what we pay our teachers with. It's what we pay for insurance and fuel and electricity, paper, copiers. All of those expenditures here are coming out of our daily maintenance and operations budget, and so that's one part of the tax rate, one part of the budget, and then entirely separate from that. So Earl and his team account for it in a separate way. Is our interest and sinking side of the budget, or tax rate? It is it's our debt service side. So what we do here is we use this side of the tax rate to go out and borrow money to pay for really expensive capital expenditures like brand new buildings, brand new school buses that can cost about $135,000 each, equipment that's very expensive. So those things that you see in a bond election. Mm-hmm. So when we're having a bond election, we're talking about this side of the budget, or of the tax rate. And the thing about this side of the tax rate or budget, is you cannot use bond monies to pay a teacher. You can't use bond monies to purchase classroom supplies, or to pay for utilities on a daily basis. So all of this here, and of course we don't ever go borrow money without the public, without our voters approving that expenditure. So we're required to get voter approval to go borrow large amounts of money like this on the interest and sinking side of the budget. And by the way, and I think Earl's going to talk about this a little later, we have a financial advisor who helps us manage this debt, so he'll be more specific about this. A couple things that are different about these two. Mr. Husfeld mentioned recapture. The maintenance and operation side of the tax rate is subject to recapture. So if we reach a certain threshold, we do have to pay back money to the state, which he talks about. But then over on the interest and sinking side, or that bond side of the tax rate, the state doesn't take any of this money. So we get to keep in the district, reinvested back into the capital expenditures of the school district for our kids, all of this on the INS side.
Yep, very separate.
Very
Completely
separate.
Yep.
Very separate.
So today we're really focusing more on the M&O side, maintenance operations side, since the INS side is really just for bonds, and we've been talking about reductions in budgets for school districts and things like that. So every time someone's talking about reducing their budget, they're talking about it on the M&O side and not on the INS side. But with the bond election last year, the INS did raise 2.5 cents, but the M&O, because it's been decreasing for several years, also went way down. Mr. Hurstfield, that's probably your favorite recommendation to bring is let's lower this tax rate for our citizens whenever we get to do that. And I think I think we stopped at 20-something years, the lowest tax rate in 20-something years, maybe even 30. We would have had to go back to some like really old.
92, 93, the district had a 49-cent tax rate.
Okay, well, there you go. You went back.
Cents. We
So
went back and looked.
Will you explain the last 5 years and what maybe people, it is different because your values may be increasing. We don't set your values, but the tax rate has actually gone down pretty significantly in the last 5 years.
Yes. Our tax rate has, as you see on the screen, the total tax rate has decreased 38 cents in the last 5 years. And what's driving that? A couple of legislative sessions ago, the legislature changed the rules for school finance and school funding, and essentially said that as property values go up, we're going to compress or reduce your operational tax rate, your M&O tax rate and stuff. Remember, there's the two parts of the tax rate, INS and M&O, so we're talking about the M&O side of the tax rate and so forth. So there's two mechanisms in the system that reduces that. One is the statewide value, property values, and then the other threshold is our local property values. So as our local property values go up, and so you'll see there over the years, as we all know around here, that our local property values, home values, are greater now than they were 5 years ago over the years. And when they go up, the state says we're going to reduce. There's formulas and calculation by which you reduce that tax rate. But then the other threshold is across the state, all school districts have to have an M&O tax rate that's within 90% of every other school district in the state of Texas. So that's the other threshold. So there's two steps to that. And they say that reduce what your tax rate is, or M&O, need to be specific, your M&O tax rate is. So again, has nothing to do with the INS side or the debt service side. So on the M&O side, and that one of the things I mentioned earlier about the hold harmless provisions, things like that, what also impacts that also is the homestead exemptions, things like that. So that's part of those that goes into the calculation. But the tax rate itself, generally speaking, goes down as your values go up. We anticipate this year, most likely, our values again will probably go up for this coming summer as well. Don't anticipate them being as much as what they were this past year because of economy. A lot of different factors impact that, but would anticipate, based on the systems and the formulas in place, that our tax rate would continue to go down as that compression works or as our values continue to increase.
So it was actually 22 cents for 4 years, and last year it was 16 cents. It was quite
in the 1 year.
Quite a drop last year.
Because our property values went up 16% or so, so therefore you had a larger decrease in the compression or reduction of your M&O tax rate.
It was also a reappraisal year for Parker County, which makes a big difference in what you see on your tax bill. If you haven't lived here long, Parker County only reappraises every other year, and so it'll be a little different than what you've seen if you've been in other counties, which is most counties that reappraise every year, and so this year would be a non-reappraisal
So like
year.
this last year, that increase was essentially a 2-year increase because of the reappraisal every other year within Parker County.
Yes, that's right. So then we get the next question every time, right? Dr. Bone, we got this all the time during the bond process. We still get it during just budget reduction process and things like that. And that is why, if I'm paying more than I've ever paid before, do we need to pass a bond? Do we need to reduce our budget? Do we need more money? And so explain that to us, please.
I'm going to get up again. So I'm going to stand in front of this part of the slide too first, because I don't want you to look at that yet. So this is the question we get the most often. This is when I talk about it being counterintuitive, super counterintuitive, right? So I'm a homeowner here with my husband, and our values are going up, even though our tax rate's going down. So we can see that we're paying more money over the years, the 6 years we've lived here, to Aledo ISD. We can see it as a line item on our tax bill that says this is how much you're paying Aledo ISD. We can see it compared to the last year, and it's going up and up. So people say, I can see how much I sent you. How can you not have enough? And I know that I'm paying you more and more every year. How is it not enough? So let's talk a little bit about that. So this here is a slide, maintenance and operations side of the budget and tax rate again, remember that. And basically right here is a level of total funding. So this is a level of total funding that we get per student, essentially. The here, right, this orange section right here is the local share. So this is the amount of the tax levy at the local level. So these are local taxes, the local taxes that we're paying here as local taxpayers here into this this amount that of total funding that we get. So as Mr. Husfeld mentioned, we get this tax levy, and then the state makes up the rest. So the state sends us revenue, this pink part here, to get us to this established total funding for Aledo ISD that we're required to get under all of the formulas and the basic allotment and all of those weights that Mr. Husfeld was talking about. So what happens if our tax levy at the local level, our local tax levy increases? What happens is we bring in more local tax dollars, and what happens is the state revenue that is sent to us decreases. So this is the same amount of total funding. It's that basic allotment and how it's all adjusted and all of that. But so what happens here when it does not change? It will not change unless, as Mr. Husfeld mentioned, the legislature takes action and increases the basic allotment or does something else to the funding system. So in this orange section, it increases because we're bringing in more local taxes because all these values of all of our homes and businesses are increasing, and the state just pulls back on their funding. So all of this right here that the state was sending to Aledo ISD, the state just keeps in the state's coffers to do with whatever in their general fund, to do with whatever the state decides to do with it. So that's how it works out. This level doesn't change unless the state comes in and says we need to increase that amount, and that's for students all across the state, for school districts across the state. It always stays the same, and it's just all of any of that extra goes back to the state.
Some of it could be in the form of Robin Hood and go back to some school districts, but it doesn't necessarily have to go.
Not necessarily, right. So if you're looking at this as a whole, of the whole system in the state of Texas, we know that there are a number of us that are paying back into the state, paying back money into the state. That means that the local property values and tax levy is so high that that the state is having to recapture some of that back, but that's been aided somewhat by some of the tax reform and compression that's been happening at the state level.
Okay, good. So another question we've gotten from several of you, again, we opened up questions through a form and you sent emails, and so we're very thankful for people who want to try to understand. So we're hoping this helps you understand a little bit today, is just how do we generate revenue? How do we fill some of these funding gaps? And so maybe you can take us through school districts trying to generate some kind of revenue.
Sure. So the first thing is about any additional revenue outside the state and local and some federal grant funding that we get revenue. It is pretty limited what we can do, and also any revenue that we make, it's all immediately invested back into programs for kids, because we're not for profit, obviously, so we're not looking to make a profit on anything that we do. So some of our sources of additional revenue are things like ticket sales and Bearcat store and those types of things. So it's pretty minimal, but we pursue it, right? There are some sponsorship deals that we have. We do scoreboard sponsors, right? So those types of things are the types of things that we can do to garner some additional revenue. It is a little bit compared to our $81 million budget, but every little bit counts, especially when we're in a situation like we are this year while we're budget cutting. We have, we're going to talk a little bit about them later because we got a question about them, but we do have some partners who do raise money from the community and give that funding back to the schools, reinvest it back into the schools, the Aledo Education Foundation and our PTO. So we're grateful to them because that definitely has an impact on the work that we do. And then I just wanted to mention too, there are grants that we can go out and seek, and we do that to the extent that we can. many grants, government grants, are related to the percentage of students who are attending your district or schools who qualify for free or reduced lunch. And those typically tend to be on the higher free or reduced lunch percentage sides. You know, you have to meet this certain threshold of that to qualify. So there are most of those we don't qualify for because of our percentages there.
You're talking about the any revenues we have go back to the general fund. That means it goes to help with really anything that we could use help with. It could go towards
Paying
learning,
for a teacher.
yeah, learning
Sure.
supplies,
Sure.
paying for teacher salary, different things like that. It doesn't necessarily this thing only funds this thing and this thing only funds this thing. It kind of goes into the whole budget.
Right. To a large extent. There are some funds like our
Right.
Child Nutrition Fund.
Yes.
There's a lot of federal money in that program. Earl accounts for that totally separately. So any income there gets reinvested back into only child nutrition.
grant would
It's
obviously be
required like that.
for what
It's
it needs to be
required
for,
like that.
something
Or
like that.
in some of the grants, sure.
Yeah.
Some of the grants are very. We did have the opportunity to like during COVID, we had the opportunity for some federal grants there, some student connectivity grants. Like we put in for all of that money and are using that money and have used it to,
for pretty specific purposes.
For specific purposes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So obviously a lot of accountability with public schools. You've gone to our website and really peruse the business page. There's a lot of things on the business page going on, but there's several ways that we are measured. And Mr. Husfeld, we get to recognize him at board meetings every year because they do such a great job with that. But really, it is of utmost importance to us, and just the fact that you're recognized says a lot about the work that you guys put in, the transparency that you have. And so there's a few, I thought you might go over a few of the kind of the main ways that we're really graded, I guess I would say,
Yes.
on our financial situation, on our budget, on our just everything that we do financially related. So School First, that's probably a really big one. And again, I'll brag on you a little bit here. This is 21st, I believe it is, straight year that we've gotten the highest superior achievement. And so could you just explain a little bit about like what types of things they're looking for to rate you that high on something like that?
Okay, sure. The School First is an acronym for Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. So 20 years ago, the legislature created this mechanism. It's been modified a lot over the course of the years, but they look at standards like 20 criteria. It's varied somewhat over the years, 20 to 25 different criteria of information that is submitted to the state, and they look at it's kind of a financial report card, if you will. You know, we have academic report cards that the state does for us. This is kind of the financial comparative to that as well. So like some of the things in the School First is like they look at a lot of different financial type information in there, like current ratios and a lot of things like that that are, you know, I geek out on, but the typical person is not. And there are different criteria or measurements in their criteria or scores, if you will, by which the school district is graded. So if you've got a better current ratio than another district, you get more points, things like that and stuff. So, and then you're rated. So it's to 100 is the score. In this past year, we got like 94, I think it was, and stuff. So, but some of the non-financial type things that are included in there, like you see on the screen, like they look at our administrative cost ratio. In other words, it's always looking at central administrative and staff and the state's definition of administrative. And the lower that ratio on a per student basis, the more points that you get. We always score very highly on that because we're very lean, I guess would be the correct way to saying it from an administrative standpoint. And the district has been that way for a number of years. They've always been, the district has always taken its stewardship of our financial resources from our taxpayers and taxpayers' monies has always been very seriously. So this has been continuing, ongoing, not just since I've been here, but for many years and stuff. One of the things you see there is like a clean audit. We're required every year by an outside auditing firm, accounting firm, CPA firm to be audited every year. Every school district is. So we've got fortunate enough to get a clean audit, and that's every year. In fact, we just had ours presented to the school board in January. So and then 150 days after the end of your fiscal year, that has to be presented at a public meeting for anyone to come and see. We post those on our school district website. So if you want to be really enthused and interested in that, you can go peruse that all you want. There's other things in there like, did we pay all our bills on time, file all of our payroll reports on time, that aspect of it and stuff. Then there's also the data that we do post on the website. There's measurements in there. Is that accurate? They're comparing the information, financial information, all of that information we submit to the state 6-8 times a year. They compare that to our audit report and to make sure that they're within a certain margin of error, things like that and stuff. So we've been very fortunate for a long period of time that we've gotten a perfect or superior score, the highest score you could have on the School First report. Other things that we've done 5-6 years ago, there's called like the 5 years ago, I guess it was, the Comptroller's Office has what's called like transparency ratings or transparency stars. They've got different transparency programs, and what the Comptroller's Office means by that is how much information are you sharing with your community. It's the financial information, bond information, a lot of things like that. So they've got very specific criteria that if you meet these specific criteria about what you post on your website and maintain over a period of time, then the Comptroller's Office reviews that. If you meet the criteria, they'll award you like what their transparency stars. So we've got that in, I think it was 2019 maybe, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And we've been maintaining that and stuff, and the state periodically reviews that. So again, sharing that information with financial information, a variety of all different sorts of things about our school district and our finances. Another one is bond ratings that we look at and stuff. As Dr. Bone mentioned earlier, we're growing, we're building buildings, we're having bond elections and bond issues that we issue debt or borrow money to build Glenn McKinney Elementary School, to renovate the building that we're in this evening, things like that and stuff. And then we repay those over 30 years generally, kind of like your home mortgage. You're going to build a home, you borrow money, you repay that. So districts are very similar to that. Well, when we go to borrow money or sell those bonds, we go through rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch. They come in and they look at our finances as well and stuff. How are we managing the district? How are we good stewards of our taxpayers' monies and so forth? Much like you go to the bank, they're going to look at your credit worthiness to determine whether we want to loan you the money. So in our school district for Aledo ISD, there's AA is our bond ratings and stuff, which is very good for a school district our size. AAA obviously is the creme de la creme, that's the top, but for our size school district and so forth, AA is very well. The last time I checked, there were like 90 school districts in the state of Texas that had the AA rating out of like the 1,100 plus and stuff. So we're very fortunate. Again, good stewards of our taxpayers' monies, and that is maintained for a number of years.
So again, all that's on our business page, but we also have added it to the page where the legislative priorities and budget information is. So that's aledoisd.org/leg or legislative priorities. You can go there and, like you said, download them.
Yes.
Take it all in.
Yes.
There's a lot of pages in there.
There's a lot of information.
You might not want to hit
yes.
print.
No. Review it before you hit print.
Review it before you hit print. That's right. So Dr. Bone, one of the reasons that we kind of decided to do this was because we have told our community, and again, you probably heard it statewide, definitely locally, that school districts are undergoing some budget cuts and budget reductions. And so we sent out an email to our community and kind of talked about some of the things we're considering, because it's a pretty daunting process. It's not one that we want to go through. It's not one we're enjoying. But can you just talk about the factors that got us, where we are now, and then kind of go through, in case some of those people didn't get to see that email, what are some things that we are considering?
Sure. So the main issue related to this budget crisis that we're in is inflation. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there's some information that we have here from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And so on the left-hand side of the slide, we're looking at an average household fuel, insurance, and utilities costs. And you can see the percent increase in those costs. We know we're all feeling it,
we're
right?
feeling it.
Yeah,
yes.
we're all feeling it, right? We know that. Add food to it, everything, right? Everything, cars, all of that. And so so that's on a household. It's very similar for us. We're experiencing the same increases to a very significant magnitude. So if you can see on this, on the right-hand side, this is since 2019. So from 2019 to the present, these are the increases in expenditures that we have to pay for these things that are, we can work on fuel costs because we can try to redraw bus routes to try to make them the most efficient, which we do. And we also have some other things that we can do to try to keep fuel costs steady and things like that. But you can see here, these aren't costs that we can just say we're not going to get the insurance. You know, we're not going to get the property casualty insurance. We'll just cut that out of our budget. So these are pretty non-discretionary. So for fuel, we went up 55.5%, which for us is $850,000 essentially. For insurance, went up 188.9%, and then for utilities, you guys know this because we're experiencing this at home, up 329.4%. So, and those increases are at a really large magnitude for us. Earl, you see an error?
Yes, ma'am.
What is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
I was just going to say that our insurance went up to 1.2 million.
Yes.
Oh, we
And
have them backwards.
Yes, have them
Gotcha.
backwards. Yeah, because our insurance now. I will say that we've added a building or two, but
Yes.
that still doesn't account for the 329% increase.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
exactly. So the insurance went up that much.
Okay. So
yes.
these
Yeah,
are
backwards.
Yes.
Yes.
That's okay.
Okay. And so this is the main issue. And so what we haven't seen to accompany these increase in costs is any additional funding. So when I showed you that slide earlier, we don't have a way to create more funding.
Right.
We have some we can sell more shirts at the Bearcat store, right? I mean,
not
we can do that.
$1.2 million
We cannot, we cannot significantly impact our $81 million budget. We have no control over that. So the people who have control of that are legislators at the Capitol. They have to take action. They have to vote to increase that basic allotment or increase the way that we're funded.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about when
Yeah.
we said since 2019.
Since 2019.
It hasn't been
so
raised, yeah.
so it hasn't been increased, and we can't make that out of thin air. So it's two factors. It's this inflation since 2019, and then no increase in that per kid funding.
And so that would be taking the 6,000, what was it,
6160.
6160, and increasing that so that every school district in the state starts at a higher number, and then they consider the other factors. Yeah.
That's the simplistic way to look at it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to go over some of the things we talked about? And Mr. Husfield went over a little bit of this. When you're cutting or saving or reducing, however you want to phrase it, when we're 80%
Yes.
people, that's hard.
Right.
That's hard
right.
work.
So we are dissimilar to some industries that aren't heavily people, right? So when they're cutting, they can lean on some of their operations cuts, or they can rely on the profits that they make, right? And so we're different in that way because 80% of our expenditures are people. We aren't able to make up the cuts that we have to make by just cutting paper or redrawing routes to try to save on
Right.
fuel, right? So we want to do all of that stuff first because our people are the most important thing in front of our kids every day, right? I mean, they make the experience for kids here. So, and we know we have the best in the state of Texas. So, so when we're looking at, and we share this with the community, we're looking at about a $3.8 million deficit for next year that we need to cut. One of the things that is challenging about this, because the state has a biennial budget, we're talking 2 years. So we will expect to not get any additional funding for 2 years. So we're starting the first round of cuts for this year. We actually did some cuts last year. We did a 10% operating budgets cuts just across the district in every department and every campus, and now we're looking to further those cuts. So now we're at $3.8 million, and are working on that in earnest right now, and we'll announce that to the staff and the community very soon.
And yeah, I was going to say, this is not something that we just figured out and started working on. This has
no.
been a very,
Yes.
very long term, and it will continue to move on past this. And so you're right.
And we had like other districts in the state, we'd advocated for and asked the state to increase our funding because of this incredibly significant increase in costs, but that didn't happen. So we're here at
Yeah.
budget cutting
Yeah.
right now.
You're about to hear a bunch of it because everybody's going through the same process. right now.
I mean, you've heard, you can see the news, you see what's happening
Yeah.
across the state of Texas, certainly North Texas. So we're looking at things because staffing is such a large part of our expenditure. We have to look at class sizes. We have to look at student programs. We have to look at how they're staffed. But first, before that, we're looking at the operational pieces. So energy management and paper and copies and all of those things, the operational pieces, and then looking at and then having to look into some of particularly how we staff.
Okay. So again, thank you guys for sending your questions because we got some really good questions and some people who really want to understand how all this works. So hopefully you're watching. So one of the things which we kind of discussed a little bit earlier, Dr. Bone, was how can donations to like the Aledo Education Foundation or the Aledo PTO be used to fill some of the funding gaps we are facing? And first and foremost, we will profess our love
Yes.
for these organizations,
Right.
but tell us how that can work.
Sure. So I'm so glad we got this question because then it means that our community sees the impact that they can have, right, for our kids here. So first of all, we have 3 strategic partners. One is Advocats, one is the PTO, and the other is AEF. And let me talk about Advocats really quickly. So what Advocats does is Advocats really provides directly to students and families who have basic needs. So that's their work. So they don't necessarily provide money to the district. They don't provide money to the district to take care of budget issues, right? So I want to focus on the Aledo Education Foundation and Aledo PTO. I know you guys know them well, but what they do is they fundraise to fill in gaps for us. And so that does can have a very significant impact on our budget and allow us to do some things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise, and fill in the gaps where we see that we're going to have deficits, for instance. So I think you may know the amount. I think AEF has donated $126,000 this year so far. PTO too, they donate lots of money every year, and so we're just very, very grateful. It definitely makes a difference,
For sure.
and so it's great to have partners like that we can rely on when they're seeing that that there's a need.
I love too that it's just the outward display of love for our staff and for
Yes.
our students in our district because they're very visible in what they do for our community, and so they provide the funding, but they also just provide the good feeling.
They are, and we're competing for the best staff, right? We want the best staff here in front of our kids every day. So when we've got partners like this who can do staff appreciation, who can grant them a grant for something instructional in their classroom, our staff feels the love. It helps us recruit the best.
Yep. It's best to be a Bearcat.
Yep.
Okay, so another question from our community, and that is what steps is the district taking to advocate for more adequate state funding? I think we actually got that one a couple
We
of
did.
times.
I think, yeah, we did. And we have advocated for it. We always have advocated for it. During the last session, we spent a lot of time with lawmakers. We put together a legislative advocacy list of priorities. We meet with a local government collaborative, which is a group that we formed in Aledo ISD that has it has our chamber is represented, our cities, our county, and our our economic development council. And so we kind of all come together to come to understand what are the needs are. And it's not just about schools and it's not just about school funding. So it's a partnership. We were at the Capitol this last session alongside our brothers who are firefighters, right? Who are there asking for something specific that would benefit fire protection and emergency services in our community. So we continue to try to advocate for that. Now, of course, we found ourselves in a situation where we are going to have to cut our budget because that increased funding did not come. So we'll continue to do that and hope that there is some level of interest in our funding in the future.
For sure. So, Mr. Husfield, I'm going to give this one to you. Another question from our community was, how is Aledo ISD planning for future financial stability? And as the money man, I would say that is in your mind at all times.
Well, financial stability. The district has had a history of being good financial stewards of our community and their taxpayers. Because especially with a growing financial stability is important for any school district, because we see that now with state funding, reductions or cuts and things, and not receiving state money, additional state money, and so forth. So you have to have some type of a savings account, if you will, or financial rainy day fund, the state rainy day fund, or financial. So no different, much like at your home, so forth. When you go to borrow money for that home mortgage or car, they're going to look at your credit worthiness, as I mentioned earlier. School districts are no different. As we borrow money, so you need a financial reserve in order to have good credit ratings and to lower the borrowing costs when we sell bonds and so forth. But then too, as Dr. Bone mentioned, just the day-to-day operations of school districts and so forth. So we have try to maintain our local policy of 25% of our operating expenditures in our fund balance. And the reason that we have that is how we get money from the state. In other words, our accounting years from September through August. So most people pay their property taxes, which you saw on the slide earlier. Most of our 60+% of our budget comes from property taxes. Well, most people pay their property taxes either in December, so they can get the income tax deduction, or they pay them in January, and so forth. So we have to operate the district, pay salaries, things like that, and set up utility bills, all of that, before we're getting state money, or getting the property tax money that we get in primarily December and January. So another reason that we have the fund balance or savings account is just to operate the district on, so we don't have to borrow money for operational purposes and so forth.
So it's not really a rainy day fund.
No,
because we have to use it.
Right.
Like we actually have to use it to
throughout the course of the year.
To pay payroll.
Yes. So we use that, for instance, just the timing of paydays. Most school districts we get money from the state in the months we do get money from the state on the 25th of the month, for instance. We pay early. Most districts pay earlier than that. They'll pay on the 20th or the 15th. There's different dates when payday is. So just that simple fact, we'll pay, $5 million roughly for our payroll, $5.2 million before we get any money from the state. And we don't get money from the state every single month. So we actively use that over the course of the year based on the different timings of the year and so forth. In our debt service, we have a fund balance in our debt service account as well. So as property tax collections, we're very, very fortunate in our school district that we collect 99% of our current year tax collections. So thank you, taxpayers within Aledo ISD
for making those payments.
for making those payments. We sincerely appreciate that. So we're extremely fortunate. Not every district I've worked in over the years are that fortunate. But we have a fund balance in there in case something were to happen, and we not collect those monies because we still have to make our mortgage payments, our debt service payments, we still have to make that. So we have a fund balance there. And then we also actively manage those debt payments that we have, much like we've saved like $52 million over since 2006, I think it is, by refinancing some of our debt. Much like when interest rates go down, you refinance your home mortgage, whatever. So we're school district, we've done that too as well when interest rates were low. So we work with a financial advisor to actively manage and prudently manage the debt payments that we have in our district, and how can we reduce those debt payments, which allows us to prepay debt. Just like maybe you make an extra mortgage payment or car payment to pay your debt off quicker, it saves our taxpayers money in the long run. So we look at that. But the fund balance is very critical for school districts. And when we do have deficit budgets and we're not receiving additional money from the state, we've used some of that fund balance over the last couple of years for expenditures and so forth. But we can no longer continue to do that because our percentage of fund balance has gotten down to what we've stipulated in our policy or school board policy, and it's just prudent for a growing district to have. So when we borrow money, we've got adequate stability, financial stability to do that. So that's why, as Dr. Bone mentioned, we talked about earlier, we're needing to make some reductions or changes in our budget because we're not anticipating additional revenues from the state.
Well, and we talked about, this is overseen by the audits that we get and the reporting that we do, but we actually have a group that kind of helps us oversee this a little bit, especially when it comes to growth, and that's our Aledo Growth Committee meets. They helped form the bond package, and they have like a very intense 9-month study of school district finances and all sorts of things, and so they have continued, and they kind of oversee these bond projects and how much you're spending on those, and making sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do with the taxpayer money that we went out and asked for.
Right. So they're our bond oversight committee, in addition to formulating the bond, but they also have put together a long range plan. So we need to be fiscally very smart about how we grow. And so they've looked at financial data and, of course, demographic growth data to understand where we might be headed with on that INS side of the budget and having to take care of the students that are coming.
So that's all the questions we had. Mr. Husfield, I learned 2 new things tonight that I did not previously know about school finance, so thank you. Good job. Dr. Bone, did you have any last minute things that you wanted to add in or that we forgot?
I do. So we started in earnest really talking to the community and our staff about a year ago about the situation that we're in now. So we've been sharing that. We have Mercedes mentioned the website where we're talking about the legislative priorities we had this last legislative sessions, and then also the budget situation. So there's a lot of information there in addition to on the business office website where you can get information. But we've been talking about it for a year, and we're here at this point. And what I wanted to make sure our staff and our community knows is we've been working on it, on how to cut our budget. It is not easy. It is painful. It will have an impact on every student in the district and every staff member. And so we regret that. We think it's our responsibility. We know it's our responsibility to take care of the district fiscally for our financial health for the future, and know that we can't dip into fund balance anymore. And so we are just we can no longer do more with less. And we are having to identify our most significant needs and put our limited resources that are becoming more and more limited as costs increase toward those things. So I think sometimes people will see it and say, oh, well, look, you just did that. No big deal. You got it done, but we're talking about people. We're talking about kid programs. We're talking about the experience for children in our schools. And we all have a really high level of expectation, and we know that our community does. And so to have to do these cuts and impact those things in a way that we really don't want to has been very hard. But like I said, we've been talking about it for quite a while now, and we've just landed in that spot.
So thank you to our parents who want to learn more.
Yes.
And who want to understand how this all works. It is so complicated, and it's taken me 11 years now to understand all of that, I guess I would say. But also, like I said, you learn something new almost every time you talk about this, because it is kind of ever changing a little bit too. So we appreciate everybody tuning in or sending us emails or asking questions. You actually can send an email anytime you want to Dr. Bone. She has an Ask Susan button on our website. Like they said, we have the aledoisd.org/ledge website that has reports on it. It has every communication we've sent to our community for over a year now that's been related to this process. If you want to print out some pages, you can go through and read those and see what we've put out to our families. But most of all
the financial stuff.
Yes,
so
audits and
demographic, just everything.
Yes, your
the
school first rating report. Yeah, if you want to see all 20 things that we're rated on and what our rating is and all that kind of stuff, you can see all that there. And so some of you, like you said earlier, may have questions because you really understand this and you want to really dig down into it. And so click that Ask Susan button, and probably Dr. Bone will then ask Earl to help answer the question for you, which is fine. Or if you just have a general question, or if you have an idea, or if you have a thought about what else we've talked about, click the button, hit the Ask Susan button and ask a question. That button is there every single minute of every single day, and you can ask anything.
Anything you want.
Anything you want at that. But we do really appreciate it. We appreciate, Earl, you in the business office and your expertise and the way that you guys handle our finances and are such good stewards of our tax dollars. And Dr. Bone, for being thoughtful in this really difficult process, honestly. But that's the way we try to work in everything we do.
Yes.
And so anyway, we thank you for joining us. It should replay. You can watch it again if you missed something, or ask us any questions that you want anytime. And we are almost to spring break, so we want to say have a very good spring break. We hope you have a relaxing, enjoyable, safe spring break. And we also will enjoy a little bit of spring break too. So don't forget that Kids have a half day on Friday, and then they're off all next week. And then the following Monday, they're also off. But we'll be back with our staff with the professional learning and work day. So thank you guys for joining us. Hit that Ask Susan button if you had any other questions. And we hope you learned 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 things tonight.
Hopefully so.
Thanks to these two and their expertise. All right, y'all have a great night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.